Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hot Takes podcast. My name is Nick. Joining me today is Michael. Christian is sadly absent from this, but we're going to talk about not anime for once because of that. So today we're talking about Star Wars, and yeah, I think most people are familiar with Star Wars, especially just like it's such a cornerstone in many ways to modern American film culture. So, with that, hey, Michael, what have you seen of Star Wars? Because I think there's a lot that many people have missed out on, and that's kind of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and so I am kind of like your bog standard our age, I guess, like our generation Star Wars fan in that I've seen pretty much all the stuff that, you know, was advertised to us. So I've seen I'm going to say it this way. I've seen the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and I have seen the trilogy that came out after all of it, so 7, 8 and 9, but I honestly don't recall much of what happened in 8 and 9. I've also seen, because this was when the revival kind of started, I've seen Rogue One, and I know of the cartoons and all of that stuff, and I know a little bit about like the Clone Wars cartoons in particular because I played one of the video games when I was like 14, and I know like about Ashoka and what her storyline is. So that's like that's all I know. So I know pretty much what, like, when you think of Star Wars and you're talking to somebody who's not watching the Disney stuff, I know all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for our age, that's kind of pretty accurate to what most people know. I mean, I think everyone knows certainly the original trilogy, prequel trilogy, sequel trilogy. I think a good number of people will have seen, despite varying opinions. I think, for our age, the Clone Wars animated show that was on Cartoon Network, at least to start off, it was on Cartoon Network. But that was heavily marketed to us. So, yeah. And then I think Rogue One is something many people also saw. That was, when they were doing the sequels, it was December is now Star Wars month. You're getting one year, you're getting a mainline film. The next year, it's going to be a Star Wars story, these spin-off films. And so Rogue One being the first of those, I think many people went and saw, Star Wars is back. It's exciting. But I don't think too many people saw one of the ones we're going to talk about, and some of the other things we're going to talk about.
I was going to say, no one went and saw Solo. Let's be completely honest here.
I saw Solo, but
Okay,
I've
you saw
seen,
Solo.
yeah. So, but yeah, so a little bit of background, is just Disney acquires Lucasfilm in late 2012. And this is after they've acquired Marvel, so now they own these two big media franchises. And obviously when you've just spent like $5 billion, you're going to do something with it. So they, I think at the time, already might have just said like, hey, we're going to do another trilogy. Or maybe they confirmed that later. I don't remember exactly. But, they also ended up doing a lot of other things as things kind of shifted around in terms of reception and also trying to copy some of the success of Marvel. So we're going to start off here with what I'm going to call just the less connected stuff, which are various films and shows that are all set in Star Wars, don't necessarily have the same relation to like the mainline trilogy or even to each other that some of the other things we're going to talk about do. So with that, we'll actually get to Solo, which you have not seen.
I have not seen Solo, and I remember when it came out and like all the advertising for it, and I was watching it, and I was like, I love Han Solo. He's one of my favorite characters. And I just had no interest in what he was doing as a young child. I was like, all the things that are interesting, in my opinion, about Han Solo are that he's kind of the washed up smuggler that like is living his heyday with the greatest ship of all time, but still nobody's hiring him because he's an asshole.
Yeah, so it's been a while since I've seen this film, by which I mean I haven't actually seen it since it was in theaters, which was in, I think that would be 2018, or no, it would be potentially. So one thing is, said December was supposed to be Star Wars month. This movie got delayed to like March of whatever year it would have been. And so there's a few things for that. You know, it sounds like production wise, I think they changed directors like 3 times. They also probably made a lot of changes based on the reception of The Last Jedi, even though this is like very disconnected, but The Last Jedi was very controversial. You know, opinions were pretty divided on that film. But overall, I still like this film. Part of it is just I like a good heist film. And when I say a good heist film, like none of the heist films are, I think, like amazing. You know, like Ocean's 11 is great in my opinion. But I realize it's actually not like, it's not cinema really. I enjoy it.
Say, that's like the appeal of a heist film, is that it is kind of crappy.
Yeah. So for me, I like a heist film. So I think that Alden Ehrenreich did a good, like, young Han Solo, but it is a bit flawed because maybe with a sequel, we could have gotten to the Han Solo we kind of know from the original trilogy. Because I think that in this, Han Solo is too much of like a good guy. And you know, that's just not who we know, you know. If he gains his redemption, if anything, in the original trilogy, to being like this hero, but even then, like, you know, he's still, at the end of the day, he was a smuggler. That's what he did. So yeah. Do I think you should watch it? I think it's still worth checking out. I think it underperformed for what it actually is. But, you know, I would watch this one again. And I think I would enjoy it as much as I did when it was in theaters.
So I really like heist movies, but I don't know what it is. It's something about like young Han Solo just did not seem to do it for me. I don't know why. I never saw it, but like that's a movie that should grab my attention and make me want to go see it because it's got all the things that I like. I like a heist movie. I like goofy shenanigans. I really like Han Solo in the original trilogy, but like he just looked so dull. Is he dull? Like, is he just the boring hero in the film? What's your kind of take there?
Yeah, I do think that again, in this movie he's too much of like a good guy. That he is kind of just, there's no real weight to his personality and actions. I can kind of get behind that from what I remember. Like, yeah. So if that's what you're looking for, maybe don't. But I still think that, you know, it's better than a lot of people would claim. And I think a lot of people who say it's bad also just never saw it. Again, The Last Jedi really harmed just the reputation of Disney Star Wars. So.
And Last Jedi was the second of the Disney.
Yeah, that was the second in the sequel trilogy. Yeah. So going on to the next thing, we have a TV show, which is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Or actually, maybe it was just called Kenobi. I don't know. This is, as far as we know, was probably intended to be the third Star Wars story movie. but it got converted at some point into a show. And personally, I never understood the appeal of doing anything more with Obi-Wan. I really like Obi-Wan, but between episode 3 and episode 4, he is supposed to just be watching over Luke on Tatooine, hiding out, biding his time to one day train him and, go defeat Darth Vader and the Emperor and everything. So to me, I never understood the appeal of, if you're doing something and lots of people wanted it to be from this time period, and that is the time period it is set in, I just don't get it. So I enjoyed it because I always enjoy more Star Wars, but I didn't enjoy it as much as a lot of other things on this list. And again, a lot of that just comes down to, it feels kind of like just forced to have this story occur. I do think there are some good individual scenes and moments in this that, really help to build on Obi-Wan's character. But yeah, that's kind of it. I don't think it needed to happen. And I don't think you're missing anything by not having seen this one.
I've seen a lot of discourse online about Obi-Wan because I was going to watch Obi-Wan, and then it came out at like a weird time where I don't think I had Disney Plus at the time, and I was like, I just don't really care enough to purchase Disney Plus and watch it. I of course then purchased Disney Plus and never got around to watching it. But I heard a lot of like the discourse online about how, a lot of people kind of agree with your sentiment. They're like, he's not supposed to be doing things right now. Like, that's the whole point. And I'm actually okay with him going and doing some things. What I didn't like, and I know this happens, is he ends up meeting Darth Vader at some point during this, which completely invalidates the whole interaction they have in A New Hope.
I think they did that scene better than I expected, because obviously they were going to have this moment occur. I think the moment they said they were doing this show, I was expecting it. And I think they handled it decently, that it kind of, again, it's still the scene in A New Hope where they're like, a presence I haven't felt in a long time, and then they meet again. It is kind of weird because they met 15 years earlier or something, which is still a long time, but it hasn't been since that moment in Revenge of the Sith. So but that moment does kind of a lot of what Obi-Wan's dealing with is kind of guilt. And I think that's a good, the way they portrayed this guilt and then had this moment as closure for it. I think that worked well, but it's also a moment that didn't really, I think, need to happen. So yeah, and obviously stuff can happen while he is on Tatooine doing other things, and stuff does happen in other shows. Obi-Wan appears in one of the other things that we're going to talk about for all of 5 minutes, and it's great. So yeah, I don't know. I think in an ideal world, if they were going to do this show, it would be a little hard to do, or rather it would have involved a lot of de-aging, would have been to do something with because Hayden Christensen also returns to play Darth Vader in this. If they wanted to bring him back, I think it would have been good to do something, and they do show a few flashback moments like this between episode 1 and 2 when Anakin is being trained, and kind of establishing this relationship that they build over those years leading up to episode 2. Because, that's a 10-year time skip. They could have done something set 2-3 years before, and yeah, that would have probably been, in my opinion, better. But yeah, it is what it is.
I remember just being disappointed not wanting to go and watch the show. Because Obi-Wan was my favorite character from the original, or the prequel trilogy. He's kind of not really a character in the original trilogy after A New Hope, so...
yeah, he's not as much a character there, but yeah, I think for the prequel trilogy, he's a highlight for sure. So,
do they explain why he changed his name to Ben?
No, I think that was truly just a poor attempt at hiding who he is. Not changing his last name,
like,
just as for...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, brother, you've got the most unique name in the world, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I get changing it, but like you're gonna keep the unique last name?
Yeah.
Seems suspicious to me.
I think maybe in the show he actually even had another name that like, because he has like a job and stuff, because he still needs to survive, and I think he maybe just had like another name.
Why does he have a job?
No, he does have a job.
Yeah, but why?
Because he still needs to like survive and like get food and stuff.
He has a lightsaber and the Force.
In a time when the Jedi are all being hunted. And again, his role especially is to stay hidden and protect Luke.
Yeah.
Like, of all the people who shouldn't expose themselves,
go hide and hunt for a living.
On Tatooine.
Yes.
A desert planet.
Yes, the sandwalker things seem to be fine. Surely they're getting food somehow.
I don't think so. I feel like that's the least practical solution is to have him try and survive off the land on a desert planet.
Maybe take Luke somewhere other than Tatooine. Just a thought.
That is kind of a flaw that's established way back. Bring him to his family. They'll never look for him there.
I was gonna say, if I'm Vader, the first place I'm checking for this child that went missing, because I know where Leia is, not a problem. The child that went missing, well, we might have a problem with that.
To be fair, when it's hidden that Padme actually gave birth, the official story is, that they died with her.
Sure,
and so...
but Vader should not be that stupid. He has the Force. He can sense things.
He's in a lot of pain. He's got a lot going on.
It's some bullshit. He's supposed to be the strongest.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on to a show I'm not going to spend too much time on. The Acolyte. I think the show was very poorly received by people. I think I liked it more than most, which is true for a lot of Star Wars things. But I do recognize that there are many flaws. Some things are done just to have like a cool visual, but then it completely contradicts other media. But the underlying framework of the show and what it's about is that it's really showing the flaws of the Jedi Order starting to form. This is set in the High Republic, by the way, which is like the period, I think it ends like 300 years, maybe before the prequel trilogy, and starts maybe like 1,000 years before. Basically, this is supposed to be like the height of the Jedi. And so this show takes place towards the end of that, and that's why we start to see, kind of some of the flaws occur. and where those originated. And so that underlying stuff, really great. Some of the other stuff they talk about that's like wider Star Wars lore, really cool. But the actual like execution on some of the story just really kind of misses. And so I don't think you should watch this. It's especially because they clearly were setting up more, and then like the show ended, you know, it's been poorly received. They're like, yeah, it's not getting a season 2. There is clearly stuff that they were aiming to show that we're now never going to see, or it's going to be shown in some other media perhaps, or explained elsewhere. You know, one thing that's not on here and that I haven't really done a lot of is read the books. I've read some of them. The ones I've read, really great. But there are so many I have not touched or am even aware of. So, but yeah, for this show, really good foundation, and then they didn't really build well upon that.
See, that's interesting, because I think, to me, the most interesting part of Star Wars is why are the Jedi so disorganized, and why, like, they have the Jedi Council and they have all these rules, but they don't seem to follow their own rules. And especially with Anakin there, they're like, yeah, we'll have him sit on the council because he's the chosen one, even though he's not the rank of master. And that's like our one rule about who gets to sit on the council. And then Anakin's like, guys, what the fuck? I have a Padawan. I am on the council. I should just be a Jedi master. And they're like, no, you're too, I don't know, crazy. But he hadn't done anything crazy at that point. Like, it was literally just, and that's interesting. Like, why are they so dysfunctional? So it's kind of disappointing to hear that it like did not capitalize on any of that.
Yeah, they like, if you watch it, you will see some of what's going on there, but it's not explored enough. And I think kind of with what was being teased in like the final episode, I think we would have seen a lot more of that in a potential second season. And yeah, unfortunately, we're not going to see it in this. Now, the High Republic, lots of that media has been done as books. So, you know, maybe that's where to go, is read those. But I could not tell you what specifically.
So you're telling me to pick up the books, you lazy bastard. Stop waiting for them to make a TV show.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, you know, the shift to, you know, what we've been talking about here is all like TV shows. And part of that is just the mandate from Disney, the wider company, to make stuff for Disney Plus. And so lots of things got converted from movies into shows. And then the shows have really just been varying in quality. And, you know, also, I think that just after the sequel trilogy ended, and how episode 9 was received, you know, they were just like, all right, we got to get out of the movies for a bit, because if we try and put out another movie, it's just going to flop. Yeah, the shows, I think I to some extent wonder if Star Wars having originated as like a movie thing just works better when it tries to stick to that format. On the other hand, we do have some great shows. We're going to get to some of them soon. But right now, we're dealing with our stuff.
I was going to say, we've got like 3 more like live action shows, and we've kind of, from what I know, which is a little bit more limited, we've saved the best 3 live action shows for last. Like, these are the ones that people love, right?
Well,
or am I missing some?
You're missing some, and some of them we're gonna get to later than you think in this episode.
What? I'm racking my brain now, because I'm like, I know we've got the 2 big boys, which everybody loves. Then we've got the other one that's kind of like the more recent one that came out that people kind of liked. It was it started off strong and then kind of like went downhill. And then I'm like, we've got the animated stuff. I'm trying to think of what other live action ones they've come out with. Enlighten me here.
So part of this is, listeners, I did not tell Michael how this episode is really organized. And he has not seen my list or anything. So
If you're gonna take me to the comic books, we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna be here for like 5 hours.
No, I haven't gone that far. So as I said, we're starting off here with the less connected stuff. So these here are all kind of separate, and there's a reason for that. So we are going to touch on one of the big boys, but in the second half, we're going to get into the stuff that's connected, and we take a while to get to the live action stuff that's in the connected portion of this.
Oh no.
Yo, strap in. We got a ways to go.
So what I'm hearing is we're doing a part 1 and a part 2, and the part 1 is the stuff everyone hates.
Yeah, so lots of this less connected stuff has been received less favorably. But yeah, we'll continue. We'll go on to Skeleton Crew. Have you heard of Skeleton Crew?
I forgot about this one. Yeah, I have heard about it. I forgot this existed because everyone hated it.
Yeah, this is just 80s kids adventure, like Goonies in Star Wars. That's what this is. This is how all the marketing was. This is, if you watch it, that's what this is. And if you watch it as just like a fun sci-fi 80s show like that, you know, or something that's trying to emulate like 80s kids movies, it's pretty fun. I think if you try and approach it as Star Wars, then there's more flaws. And part of it is that there are just some like big kind of like lore universe implications that are just completely unaddressed at the end. So you go on this whole adventure and stuff happens, and then like the ending actually has like wider ramifications, and it's not going to be probably addressed anywhere. It just happens. So yeah, I mean, I really don't have too much to say about this one. I think if you watch it as like a fun, like sci-fi take on something like the Goonies, great. Does it really fit into Star Wars? Somewhat, but less. Yeah, it's enjoyable. I really just don't feel like it fits as well into Star Wars as it should. And that's one of the few, maybe the only thing on this list where I truly feel like could be considered like not Star Wars. It doesn't have that Star Wars feel to it, at least for me.
So I think the best way that I've ever heard this show described, because this is now bringing back a lot of memories of when this show came out, because the hate for this show was immense. And I think the best way I heard it described was somebody on the Star Wars Reddit posted and said, this is just bad Cowboy Bebop set in the Star Wars universe, except not in the Star Wars universe at all. And I was like, that's all I need to know. First of all, bad Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop, haven't seen it, but I know it's great, and I know everybody like kind of, that's like one of the cult classics. But I have heard you have to be a special kind of person to really appreciate what they were going for. The show's great, but what they were going for. And then you set that in Star Wars, but not really Star Wars, and make it bad? I can totally see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun adventure, but just... I think there are better things to watch than this, and I really don't feel like it fits as well into Star Wars. The wider universe. It's Star Wars, but not Star Wars. So yeah, we're gonna move on from this. You know, there's not too much more to say about it, and we're gonna get to something I could talk a lot about. We're going to talk about Andor now. And you've heard of Andor.
So we're gonna take a brief accord here. because the whole reason we're doing this episode is because I have said many times to Nick, just like offline and just hanging out, that I love Star Wars, but I have not been captured by any of the new stuff. And when Andor, was it season 2? Was that when it came out? Did that come out already? Okay, so it must have been when season 2 came out. Nick profusely was like, this is the thing to get you back into Star Wars. Watch Andor. And I never did it. So here we are.
My messaging is still the same. Watch Andor. It is just absolutely fantastic. You did say you've watched Rogue One, right?
I have seen Rogue One, which is why I was so interested in Andor. I just never got around to watching it. It is one of those things that's like on my list. I just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. So for anyone who has not watched Andor, but if you have seen Rogue One, well, first you should watch Rogue One regardless. Excellent movie. It's if
the last
mainline
good thing they did.
If mainline Star Wars is classic space opera, which it is, Andor is modern space opera, which is a little darker in tone, and it's so Rogue One has all these characters. You see this kind of resistance fighting, and there's just the kind of like, hey, yeah, the rebellion is doing like terrorist acts. There's no way around that, and there are things they do to achieve their goals that are not the just like happy story of original trilogy Star Wars of, hey, we're defeating the Empire. Andor really expands on that in the show. So season 1 is we meet Cassian, and he's really kind of just surviving, trying to get by, and we go from kind of that into really believing in this idea of the rebellion and fighting back against the Empire. And just the journey he takes in that season, it's really great. Another great part of the show is we're not just following him, we're always following also from the Empire side. We're following the ISB, which is, the like secret police, keeping an eye on everything. And we're from that also seeing just, why does the Empire fail? And, the flaws that exist within that sort of bureaucracy and everything else that will eventually lead to the Empire losing. Season 2 continues on this. It's split into 4 parts. Each one jumps ahead a year, and it's leading into Rogue One. And so we just see Andor grow into who he is in that movie. The actions he takes. We also see how the Empire, or not the Empire, the rebellion is built up more. It goes from these individual like cells and groups into this like wider alliance. And there's a lot of inspiration just from historic events, regimes, resistances. They do all sorts of cool things in just like taking that inspiration and reusing it, building out new cultures within Star Wars. Typically there's only been like a few different planets that have really been explored. We get some new stuff in here. And there's also just the added benefit that there are kind of 2 trilogies I think you can build out of this. So you can watch Andor seasons 1 and 2 and Rogue One, and it's kind of, the Andor Rebellion trilogy. Or Rogue One has also always been a nice lead in to A New Hope, taking like half an hour apart between the ending and start of those movies. Because Andor season 2 leads into Rogue One, not like quite as directly as say Rogue One into A New Hope, but it does get there. So I think you can take that last part, those last 3 episodes, watch Rogue One and watch New Hope, and that forms its own kind of trilogy. So yeah, really just absolutely phenomenal show. It is telling interesting stories in the Star Wars universe rather than, we talked a bit during like the Marvel episode of like doing a genre within Marvel. This is kind of doing political like spy thriller in Star Wars. So yeah, really, really good show. Highly recommend that. If you've seen Rogue One and you liked it, definitely watch this. And if you don't necessarily even consider yourself a Star Wars fan, I think this can appeal to anyone. Because again, it's telling the story within the Star Wars universe, but it's not so dependent on being Star Wars that you feel like you're missing out if you're not a fan. And I think that's just another mark of this being a great show is, again, in the universe, but not reliant on it to tell its story.
Interesting. I will definitely have to watch Andor because that sounds right up my alley. I love the spy thriller. I loved Rogue One, so I'm sure I will really enjoy Andor when I get to it.
Yeah, I am eagerly awaiting season 2 coming out physically. I imagine because season 2 only came out earlier this year, so I imagine that'll be a early 2026 sort of thing, and then I'm probably just going to like set aside a long weekend and just like watch the whole thing because this is truly I feel very safely like saying just like Andor is probably the best thing to come out under Disney for the Star Wars franchise. I really like the show. There's so many good things about it. I couldn't really say more without just spoiling the show for you. So, but yeah, definitely huge recommendation from me. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and after the break, we'll be back with the more connected side of what's been released under Star Wars. I have found that because a lot of the like Ghibli stuff that isn't like purely fantastical is very like slice of lifey. I really vibe with it. I think like a movie format for me that might work
You are
really
impossible
well.
to figure out.
No, I like Whisper of the Heart or From Up on Poppy Hill are very like pretty slice of life movies. And or Only Yesterday, that one is like very slice of life, and I don't know, I've been actually really vibing with them. I just can't do it as I can't do it as if you give me like 6 hours of it, it's too much, but as just like a 90-minute movie,
For a small bite.
Yeah, a little slice of life as a treat, and then if you give me a full meal, that's too much. Full meal, no, but as a little treat,
As a little treat.
Yeah. And now back to our main program. So now that we've talked about all of these like less connected things, we're going to talk about what I'm categorizing as the more connected works. At the center of these is basically one man, Dave Filoni. Do you know who that is?
Never heard of that guy before in my life.
So these days, I believe his actual title is something like Chief Creative Officer at Lucasfilm. And so we need to jump back in time. So we've been talking like post-Disney acquisition about all of these things. We're now going to actually pre-Disney acquisition to 2008 with the Clone Wars animated show that was on Cartoon Network, which you have some familiarity with. Have you seen like... so it started off, it had like a pilot movie, and then there was the show. Have you seen like bits of the show? Did you see the movie? What's kind of your experience with it?
So I played the spin-off Wii video game when I was a kid, and that got me kind of interested. And so I watched a little bit of the show. I think I want to say it was on season 2
Hmm.
when I kind of jumped in. Subsequently, since then, I pretty much know the plot of the Clone Wars show. I don't know like everything that happens, but I know like kind of the general storyline and why it matters and what it then leads into.
And it does lead into a lot. So, first off, there is also a 2003 Clone Wars. They call it like a micro series. This was run as like ad break programming. So you would get like these quick, like 2-minute things in between like other stuff on Cartoon Network. And it was all to promote the release of Revenge of the Sith. So it introduces a lot of characters who will reappear in the 2008 show, though it is not canon. And there's a few things that differ between this micro series and the larger animated show that is canon. So this is like George Lucas's last big contribution to Star Wars, is doing this show. And towards the end of that show, I think they were not making money at all. It was truly like George Lucas has often, throughout doing his movies, been a pioneer to a lot of things, and that often means losing a lot of his money. So he was losing, I think, like millions funding this show himself, basically. Like they were not making the money back. But, you know, much like how he founded Industrial Light and Magic, which does so much like CG and practical effect work these days. Or he was a big adopter of early like digital cameras for making movies. You know, this also helped produce a lot of new tools for 3D animation. But as part of the show, one of the people working on it and who will become a big part is Dave Filoni. So basically, he has always been kind of in the public marketed as like George Lucas's protege. He is like his successor. And, you know, now he is the chief creative officer of Lucasfilm. So his influence on the show then leads into many other shows. So the Clone Wars establishes a lot of things. For example, like the version of Mandalore and the Mandalorians first like appears in this. Ahsoka Tano is his original character. That is like all Dave who has come up with this. Darth Maul reappears in the Clone Wars. That was a huge marketing thing for, I think, season 3, and he will reappear many times throughout Star Wars after this, after bringing him back. This show is good, but you should not watch this show in its entirety. I would recommend that if you do want to watch it in its entirety, look up the full chronological list, because seasons 1, 2, and to some extent 3 were released out of order. Basically, these are just kind of snippets from the Clone Wars. They are different events that happen. They do actually happen in a certain order, but the order doesn't actually really matter. Season 3 and onwards, they're actually trying to do a bit more with telling a overarching story and getting us to the point we are at in episode 3. So, but prior to that, it's the first 2 seasons especially are just more like snippets, and not all of them are great, you know. There's a few like Jar Jar Binks episodes, you know, he's still around. So yeah, if you're gonna watch this, I would recommend, I don't think you should watch the whole thing, but if you are going to watch the whole thing, look up the chronological order. But what you should probably do is look up like a highlights list. I'll try and link one in the show notes, of just like, here are either arcs that are important to understanding Star Wars down the line, or they are actually just really good arcs, even if they are standalone, only happening here and don't have any wider implications. But this show builds the foundation for so much of the rest of Star Wars content that came out after. So, yeah.
Interesting. And I think I've always kind of been interested in like watching the show properly because I never really did, and I know a lot of the cool like story points, but it's interesting for you to be like, don't watch it in its entirety. Watch the highlights. So maybe I've gotten the experience I need.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you've never watched the entire show, maybe it is worth it to kind of see everything. I do still think you should go to chronological order. But I think for anyone like me who has seen the entire thing, there's not really a point to like rewatching the whole thing, because also again, mainly in the first 2 seasons, the show is much more of like a kid's show. So this is like a war, but like some of that is a bit downplayed, whereas later portions are much more like PG-13. Like this is something that we can still like have on TV. It's not that gruesome or anything, and still have on like a children's network, but it is much more serious. And in some ways there are some moments that are like, could they really have shown this on Cartoon Network? I guess they did. But yeah, it's I think that, the highs of the show are really great, but like some of the lows are just entirely things you do not need to be concerned with. So yeah, I think a highlights list is probably the better way to go, but I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with watching all of it if you've never seen it before. So yeah. We'll now continue to post-Disney acquisition. So the first thing that actually gets released under Disney, at least as far as shows and movies go, there may have been books or other things going on, is Star Wars Rebels. Much like Clone Wars, it starts off much more kid-oriented. It does grow to be a bit more serious and mature. Because Dave Filoni is on this, we have the return of some Clone Wars characters. There's a lot of what Dave Filoni does is building up a lot of like lore and doing lots of world building, building up kind of the mysticism of what the Force actually is. And so there's a lot of that in this show. We do get some more time with the Mandalorians. And much like Andor, this is leading into the original trilogy. So obviously it's called Star Wars Rebels, so it's about one of these rebel cells that's operating kind of independently and will eventually join into this alliance. But, this here is, much more focused on just like one group kind of operating. So we have the main character is Ezra, who finds out he can use the Force, and so he will be trained as a I feel like there's an actual term used for this, but as a Jedi, but not as part of the Jedi Order, since that does not exist at this time period. So yeah, really the show is in some ways, I think overall, better than Clone Wars. Because again, some of the lows of Clone Wars, when you factor those in, I think it kind of brings the show down. Whereas, Rebels ran for a shorter period of time. And overall, its consistency and quality, or rather, it was just more consistent in its quality. So I still prefer Clone Wars overall. But I think kind of objectively, Rebels is the show that would be like rated higher on average. So yeah, should you watch this? Yeah, I think it's worth it. Again, you're probably going to start off feeling, especially with like the first season, like this is too much of a kid's show, but it does get to be a much more compelling watch past that.
Interesting. I knew nothing about Rebels except for it was an animated show and the time period that it took. That's actually a really interesting story because I've kind of always conceptually wondered there had to be people that could use the Force in between the time of the Jedi falling and Luke. That's a long period of time. Like, there has to be people that can do it. So,
yeah, outside of TV and film, we also have the modern Star Wars Jedi games. So that's currently just Fallen Order and Survivor, which follow Cal, who is actually, he was a Padawan who escaped Order 66. So it's not quite as late as like someone new who like the Jedi Order, like he would have never been part of. But that's another, I really like both those games. Just as, I guess, a side note to this discussion on the TV and shows. Great games. I think, you should try them out. But yeah, especially if you are interested in kind of like, what are like Jedi up to in between episodes 3 and 4 and Force users? What's some of that stuff that's going on? Yeah. Brief note here, I have it just on my list. I've never actually watched this show because from everything I've heard, this is just like pure kid show, is Star Wars Resistance. It takes place prior to episode 7, so the sequel trilogy, or maybe during it, or maybe in between 7 and 8. I guess there's not really a lot of time between 7 and 8, so probably just prior to episode 7. It's another Dave Filoni show, but again, from everything I've heard, this is just like a kid show, and it only ran for like 2 seasons, and it never really grew beyond being a kid show like it maybe had the potential to. Looking at the track record of Clone Wars and Rebels becoming much more serious and having these like really great moments. As far as I know, Resistance never really gets there. You can skip this one. I just have it on here as another like, Dave Filoni did this.
Dave Filoni was involved.
Yeah. So now we're getting into stuff that is just before the end of the sequel trilogy and kind of after it. And, this is the area where we're only getting shows at this point now, post Rise of Skywalker. So The Mandalorian starts airing before a month before The Rise of Skywalker comes out. So it's like early November. And the first season is largely disconnected from the larger Star Wars universe. It doesn't really have any sort of references or cameos to other things. So it takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi. There are things like warlords from the Empire remnants who have like stormtroopers and stuff still, just doing their bidding. Maybe not even like stormtroopers like properly, but just people who have stormtrooper armor. So because it's so disconnected, it's so new, it is widely praised. It's just like, we're finally getting stuff that is not about the Skywalkers and kind of the events of the trilogy movies. This is something that is like very original in Star Wars. So it does really well. I really like it. It's great. You should definitely watch the first season. The second season begins tying into other things. Most of this is actually not so much tying into the trilogy or the Skywalkers or anything. It is more that The Mandalorian, on its success, is being used to launch other shows and things. There were originally meant to be like 5 spin-offs. I forget how many actually. I mean, I guess we're going to go through this list and see how many actually survived into production, which is a common thing in Star Wars. There are so many projects that are not on this list because they were announced and never went anywhere. There are like free trilogies from different directors that never happened and have never officially been canceled. Anyways, the second season, I honestly don't remember too many of the like specific details of what happens in this outside of the finale. The finale is really cool, really great. We do have the return of Ahsoka. So Ahsoka has been appearing also through like Rebels and other things. She appears here for the first time in live action, and she will obviously get her own show, which we'll get into a moment. Yeah, second season, it largely feels it's not as good because it is now so focused on like building up its own like little cinematic universe within the Star Wars universe. It is so many things are being set up to potentially be shows, and they were all announced. And again, many of them did not happen for various reasons. So one of those shows is also Book of Boba Fett, which is not good. It is, for everything that it does right, it does more wrong. And randomly, just like the middle 2 episodes of the show are actually Mandalorian season 2.5. Like key moments happen in those episodes, and they are like purely about the Mandalorian, and you need them to understand like what's happening in season 3, or rather to not be like, wait a minute, this is what happened at the end of season 2. How are we now here in season 3?
So it's getting the Marvel issue of like you have to do homework to watch the show you want.
So that is basically the issue, and kind of what they're doing here is they are trying to copy Marvel's strategy into like this TV format. So launching all of these shows in season 2, and then the expectation you will watch all of them, and they all connect, and you need to watch all of them in order to understand what's going on. This is truly like where we see Disney's like mandate to make Disney Plus content and how it interfered with Star Wars. So yeah, I think season 2 is good. I think the show overall is good. I just think that this is too much of like a springboard for other things, that it loses the appeal of the first season, which again was very like standalone and disconnected and its own thing within Star Wars. So yeah, Book of Boba Fett, again, I think you can watch like the middle 2 episodes to figure out what's going on with the Mandalorian. Other than that, no.
Yeah, and that's so disappointing. I was so excited for Book of Boba Fett, and then like I just heard it was terrible, and so disappointing. He's such an interesting character. I want to know more about him, and then just terrible.
Yeah, it's honestly, I can't even tell you most of what happens in that show anymore. I can think of like moments that are really bad. There's like this, I'll give like one scene here. It's like this chase scene, except the chase feels super slow. Like it feels like they could just be like walking to perform this chase. It is really weird. This is meant to be on like speeders, like this high speed chase through the city, and it just feels so slow. Like the vehicles feel slow. It feels like it's playing out too slowly. That's just like a moment I think of when I think of the show. It's just really bad. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm trying to picture that in my head now, and that's
it's really hard to get across what this looks like. Maybe you just need to look up this chase scene and understand what it is. But yeah, the third season of The Mandalorian is less about, and they even said this in kind of like interviews, the titular Mandalorian. So again, Mandalorian is like a culture. It is multiple people. The Mandalorian, his name is actually Din Djarin. The third season of The Mandalorian is more about Mandalorians, plural, the people, the culture. And it's pretty good. I do like the Mandalorian culture, so it is nice to see this kind of expansion. But again, we've kind of really veered off the path of we're following this one guy and it's all disconnected. So it's good, but again, we've strayed from this original premise. And next year we will get The Mandalorian and Grogu as a movie. Returning to theaters, Star Wars, they're doing a movie to kind of finish off their first live action show. And I am cautiously optimistic. I think they've done a lot of good stuff. Jon Favreau is actually the showrunner for this. So Dave Filoni is involved in this, and he's written a few episodes, particularly anytime Ahsoka shows up. But this has been a pretty good show overall. We'll see how the movie does. I'm just not really sure if this is meant to be the conclusion. What is the conclusion to their story? And I'm really not sure what to expect. And so when I say cautiously optimistic, I'm really just not sure what is the ending they're going to give us, and will it feel satisfying, especially when we've lost so much of the focus of these two, with season 2 and season 3 expanding to like a wider group of people. What exactly has been the arc of all of this? So
very interesting. I think The Mandalorian is like the perfect concept for a Star Wars show. I think it touches on a lot of like other big topics, like who are the Mandalorians? Why does Boba Fett have Mandalorian armor? Why did Jango Fett have what would be possibly mistaken as Mandalorian armor? And like why are a lot of people not really sure what the Mandalorians were and what they did? And then the whole Baby Yoda Grogu thing, like what is he? What is his importance? And so like there's a lot of like good stuff in there, but I think the reason I never watched The Mandalorian is every time I'd want to go watch The Mandalorian post season 1, I never got around to watching it when season 1 was airing, and every time I would be like, I should really go watch this show, I would hear something along the lines of, oh, the book of Boba Fett sucked, and that was part of the point of The Mandalorian. Or I would hear like, season 3 is not even really about the guy that everyone's interested in. And then I'd be like, oh, well, that's kind of lame too. And then, I'd be interested because I'd see, oh, Ahsoka's in the show. Okay, well, but she's only in like 3 episodes and it's to sell her spin-off show. And I'm like, man, this is just so exhausting because like I lost interest in the Marvel stuff, which I had a bigger sell in, and it sounded a lot like they were doing the same thing that I didn't like over there to another series that I love, Star Wars. So it's both validating and disheartening to hear that is exactly what they did.
Yeah, I think basically everything you've heard is accurate. I think it is still good overall, but it is certainly not without its flaws. So I guess it's really up to you how you choose to consume this one. There is also, I believe, planned. So remember, season 2 was meant to launch into a bunch of different shows. Eventually, all of these shows were meant to like reconnect into a finale movie. I think that movie is technically still planned, but given half of these shows never made it to production, what exactly it will be is maybe a little less clear. So we are actually going to talk about Ahsoka, though, because that might give us some hints. So Ahsoka is both following up on things shown in The Mandalorian, but more than anything, this is a sequel to Star Wars Rebels. You have multiple returning characters, and the core premise of this is that the kind of main villain from Star Wars Rebels, Admiral Thrawn, we don't really know what happened to him. They left it kind of open. And basically, you know, here he is returning in some way. That is going to probably be the overarching thing that makes these things all tie back together. And this was actually a big part of what is now referred to as Legends, which is, you know, all of the stuff that was decanonized post-Disney acquisition to kind of wipe the slate clean and give them, you know, they're not bound to anything. So this show is very much a Filoni production because Ahsoka is the character he came up with. This is the first time he's doing like live action show on his own. It has flaws, but the parts of it that are really good are the parts that Dave excels at. And unfortunately, we don't get enough of them in the first season. There is a second season coming. But the parts that are most interesting and what he does well is expanding on, again, kind of the Force, the mysticism of it, kind of the lore and world building of, you know, what is this thing and how does it play into the universe? So I feel like for having, I think it was 8 episodes, I feel like not a lot actually ends up happening in the show. But I do think it's good. And if you're a fan of Rebels, it's probably better. I think if you go into the show just from The Mandalorian, you will be like, who are these people? Why do I care? It is very much a Rebels sequel more than it is a spin-off from Mandalorian season 2 in terms of what is the actual plot going on. So yeah, I guess my recommendation for you is if you like Ahsoka from everything else she's been in, and if you like Star Wars Rebels, the story continues here. But if you don't really care about Ahsoka, and you don't like Star Wars Rebels, there's probably not a lot in this show for you. So yeah, this is not the show to like go to first or anything. This is a show that I think requires other shows to truly understand, or appreciate, or be invested in. So.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, that makes a lot of sense because, like, you know, Ahsoka's always been like on the periphery of all of these stories, and so it makes sense that like when she gets her own show, hey, all the things that she was on the periphery of, go watch those beforehand.
Yeah. I mean, she is towards the end of the Clone Wars, and particularly something I didn't really mention when we were discussing it is that under Disney, they released season 7 of the Clone Wars. They finally adapted some of the arcs that had been planned, and one of them is spoilers, but not really, because, you know, you've kind of had time and maybe already know this, so I'm not really considering it a spoiler here. But Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order. That is why Anakin does not have a Padawan in episode 3. But happening alongside episode 3 is the Siege of Mandalore. So basically, Darth Maul, through various events, has taken control of Mandalore, the planet. And the Siege of Mandalore is basically Ahsoka returning, being like, hey, Darth Maul is here. We can catch this guy. And at the same moment, the events of episode 3 are starting, which is to say Chancellor Palpatine has been kidnapped. We have to go rescue him. So a detachment is given to Ahsoka to go to Mandalore. It's really good. It is a 2-hour movie released as 4 episodes. that is happening alongside beautifully animated, really satisfying end to the Clone Wars as a show. But yeah, that is a moment that is much more about Ahsoka. But that is also, like, prior to the show, the most she's ever been the focus, probably. And that's only, again, 4 episodes. But yeah, returning to Ahsoka, yeah, it is, like you said, she's been more on the periphery. Now she's the main focus, but to truly understand and appreciate it, you need to know what she's been up to. So, all right. We're now going to go talk about The Bad Batch, which was a...
Do we have to?
You don't sound too happy about it. What do you know about this one? What have you heard?
So The Bad Batch looked really interesting when they were promoting it, up until they explained what it actually was. Because they've already done it. Like, the concept sounds interesting, because it's like, so when they were originally, like, promoting it, like, very early on, it sounded very much like Suicide Squad, but within Star Wars, of like, these are not the villains, but the people that are kind of the jerks, and now they're coming together to make this thing happen. And that's just not what they did, and it made me very sad.
See, I don't remember that marketing, but maybe that's because I knew. So the Bad Batch does appear in an arc of the Clone Wars. So the show is done in the same animated style, and it is truly like the direct sequel to that show. It picks up during Order 66, which so much of Star Wars media has been built around Order 66. But it gives... We've had a lot of media come out that takes place between episode 3 and 4, but this is one that is taking place, like, in those earliest stages, because so much of it is happening in kind of that middle moment where, like, the Empire is already pretty well established, or the Empire is about to fall. This is the first time we're seeing the Empire as it is truly starting. So it's all of these things and new regulations and rules and stuff being introduced. That is kind of just interesting to see, this transition from Republic into the Empire. And overall, I like the show. But I do think that they should have condensed it down a bit. There's a bit too much of what's, I guess, kind of filler in it. And I also think that some of the overarching plot, it could have worked really nice with some of the events of The Mandalorian to kind of create a through line and explain some things that happen in the sequel trilogy. So basically, from this moment, like episode 3, we could have been setting some things up in combination with other shows that might help, while not fix the sequels, give some explanation to what's going on there and some of the events that occur. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite deliver on that. So I don't know. My feelings on the show are kind of mixed. I do like the show, but I think there are a lot of things that drag it down. That I think it's the sort of thing, I think if you are a Star Wars fan and you like these characters, like, just watch a little bit of season 1. If you like these characters, you will probably enjoy the show as a whole. It is very character driven. But if you aren't connecting with the characters, then I don't think the show is going to have a lot to offer you in terms of, like, wider Star Wars enjoyment. So yeah.
See, I think that what I didn't like was this was the era where, like, Disney because this is a more recent one, and Disney has very recently, as in like the past like 2 years, been trying to market things instead of, hey, stories, hey, look at these cool shiny characters. And so that's how they marketed Bad Batch, and they marketed it in such a way where I was like, oh, these are all really interesting characters. And then the first like episode came out, and I read like a bunch of the reviews. I was like, well, the characters just aren't how they marketed them, and I didn't like that, so that soured me on the show. And I didn't know they were in the Clone Wars. I knew it was like a sequel to the Clone Wars, but I didn't know they were in that, and they never touched on that in the marketing either. So
Yeah.
I didn't really even know that either.
So, in the Clone Wars, it's like a free 4-episode arc. And they appear, and in the Clone Wars, at least, they are all very much playing a certain archetype of character. And that is all they are. You have like this sniper who's like super serious, and you have just the dumb big guy with strong muscles. You have the nerdy guy with all of the tech, and then you have like their leader who's this like just kind of generic badass. That is who they are in the Clone Wars. And going off of that, you probably wouldn't be too interested unless you just wanted like generic archetypes in Star Wars doing stuff. The show does make them deeper and expands on them, and again, it does become a much more like character driven show. There are other characters introduced, and it's a kind of utter send off to the Clone Wars era of things, and the clones kind of in general. The Siege of Mandalore arc is a nice end to the show, which is the clones are a big like overall as a group characters as part of the Clone Wars, obviously. But the Clone Wars in the stories it's trying to tell is more about people that we already know, or Ahsoka, in what it's achieving ultimately. Bad Batch is more a send-off than to the clones themselves, because the ending of the Clone Wars show doesn't necessarily do that as much. I mean, it does, just in a different way. But yeah, this show then, past season 1, is more specifically about the Bad Batch themselves. And if you like the characters at this point, you will probably still enjoy the rest of the show. But I don't think it's as good as the Clone Wars. And it's not something that I'm going to jump to recommending to people.
Interesting. And so this is where my knowledge of any of it ends. So anything you tell me at this point, there could be more things. There might not be, because the Bad Batch really soured me on like Disney's marketing of Star Wars. So I know Ahsoka is getting another season. I knew the Mandalorian movie was happening. Outside of that, anything that's coming, I have no idea. Anything that has happened since then, I also don't know anything about it.
Well, we do have not a lot more things, but a few more things here. So we're going to talk about the last Dave Filoni thing, which is Tales, generically. They are 3 different seasons or 3 different shows, depending on how you want to view them. The first season is Tales of the Jedi. This follows Ahsoka, obviously. She has to be in everything. Classic. From her, at 3 different stages. I believe it's 3 different stages. So it's 6 episodes. And then on the flip side, so it's 6 episodes. The other 3 episodes focus on Count Dooku. But when he was a Jedi, something that's not really in any other media. So it really expands on the prequel and Clone Wars era. The moments shown are actually relevant. They are just like random stories. I mean, to maybe some extent they are, but they do. If you've ever read like the Star Wars wiki, you know how ridiculously detailed it is. This is filling in some of those details, but it is really good with how it does it. So is it necessary viewing? No. If you like Star Wars, should you watch it? Yes.
So, just a question then. If
Yeah.
it touches on Dooku when he was a Jedi, does it explain how he put the order for the clones in? Is that what they're touching on?
Some of that is actually explained in the Clone Wars show. It is further this year. I guess to kind of just give it away, we see kind of the moment that solidifies his turn towards the Sith. So that is kind of what his episodes are: is who he is as a Jedi and why that leads him down this path to joining the Sith.
Jedi Master.
Yes, he is the one who. Yeah, he was trained by Yoda. He trained Qui-Gon Jinn, who trains Obi-Wan, blah, 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 all that. And then the Ahsoka stuff is... honestly, I really only remember one part of it in particular. But, it's good. Dave obviously loves his original character and does well to expand her in these most minor ways. So
back to the Dooku thing, because now I'm stuck on this.
Yeah.
So if he trained Qui-Gon Jinn, why does no one recognize him?
What
do they address that?
What do you mean?
No one recognizes him, because they all know, they're all like, it's Count Dooku. He's evil guy, and no one ever mentions that like Obi-Wan should have some sort of interaction with this man if he was Qui-Gon's master.
Yeah, see, this is again the Clone Wars, and maybe the reason to watch all of it is that it really expands on the prequels as a whole, and you do have these moments and interactions that there wouldn't really have been much reason or time for. Now, to be fair, is there much of a reason? There is more reason for you to interact with, like, the guy who trained your master, like, their master, but also it is... Maybe it's not as spelled out in the movies, and it is only because I've consumed all this extra Star Wars content that I know this, but Count Dooku basically leaves the Jedi Order. He actually, I guess, comes from like a wealthy family, and so he goes into like politics. There is no reason to think of him as having become a Sith from anyone else's point of view. The explanation is more so that he is just taking up this other role instead of being a politician, and that is who he is to the public as well. He's not a Sith Lord. He is just the guy who's leading, independence from the Republic and their oppressive ways and whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But, the Jedi know he's a Sith Lord.
No, they don't. They don't.
Well, but they figure it out.
Oh, they do. Yeah. In episode 2. That's when we learn.
Yeah.
That's when the Jedi learn that.
I feel like we don't touch on that enough, considering he was literally Obi-Wan's master's master.
Yeah. But they don't know until then. I don't know what you're missing here.
How did Yoda not figure that out? How did Yoda?
Well, that is that is part of the flaw of the Jedi Order. Is also the flaws of Yoda. Yoda is blind because he has been alive for so long to just the flaws within the Jedi Order and the things they cannot see.
Right, but I feel like Yoda knows someone's pulling the strings. He knows Count Dooku is leading the Independence, and he knows that there's a Sith Lord. How stupid do you have to be to not connect those?
The Sith Lord, though, that they're searching for is Palpatine.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I feel like the first place that I would look is, the Jedi who left us and is now leading the people that are against us. That's the first place I would check. I would be like, "Yo, that guy. Let's talk to the politician guy who used to be
Yeah.
one of us and
Well,
trained Qui-Gon, who also kind of seemed like he was gonna leave us."
again, it is just they are blind at this point. They have fallen from where they are in the era of the High Republic, where Yoda is around during that time. And so they, while, post episode 1 having Darth Maul appear, it's like the Sith may be back. It is still like they are kind of denying it, and are blind to, what might be going on. Also, just like Count Dooku, there are flaws in the Republic. There is corruption and stuff. So maybe he is truly just being a politician trying to do better by his people. There is no reason, they have no reason to suspect that he is, until the events of episode 2, that he is a Sith Lord and maybe has more malicious intent. There is no reason to go after that further.
Again,
before that.
I'm totally on board with not necessarily thinking it's him. But if you have these suspicions that there's somebody pulling the strings, there's a Sith Lord potentially, like a Sith thing going on, potentially because of Darth Maul, there's a resistance, we have a Jedi who left to go create the resistance. Again, that's the first place I'd start asking questions. Like, even if it's not Dooku, hey, have you heard of anything going on over here, Dooku? It kind of happened in your territory of your politician thing. Maybe it's not you, but have you heard anything suspicious?
I don't know. I feel like you're pointing out I don't know really where you're going with this line.
I just feel like it's obvious. That's all I'm saying. I feel like it's a little too obvious for them to have missed it.
All right. Well, we're gonna go talk about the second season, or the second show. I'm gonna refer to them as seasons, but Tales of the Empire. This is about the Empire side. So as opposed to the Jedi side being the good guys, here we get to look at the bad guys. Except I don't know. I don't want to give everything away. So we follow a character from the Clone Wars on one half, Barriss, who is a Jedi Padawan, who was under Luminara, if that means anything to you. She has a big connection to Ahsoka, and so she is one of the people. Then on the other side, we have, I am totally blanking on her name right now. She is a big character in the Ahsoka show. And so this is basically her backstory. How is she who we will eventually see in Ahsoka show? This is how she joins the Empire and gains this post-Empire following the position she has. How did she originally get there? It's still pretty solid. I don't think it was as good as the first season. I feel like the Tales of the Jedi was kind of more definitive into what it led into, whereas I think at least the Barriss side left so much open for them to potentially explore. And that's not really what I was kind of expecting from this. I was expecting Tales to be these little glimpses that are just providing a little more detail into, you didn't necessarily need to know this, but it's cool to know this. And so, yeah, I think the Barriss side is basically disappointing because it ends up leaving things more open rather than just being those small, standalone glimpses that, if you missed them, not a big deal. And if you saw them, it's just a cool little expansion. So then this year, so they've been doing these yearly, we had Tales of the Underworld. And I've honestly, despite it being the most recent one, forgotten everything about this. I can tell you that one side of this is about, oh wait, no, I did just remember the other side. Yeah, it really wasn't all that great. So one side is about Cad Bane, who was this big cool guy in the Clone Wars, this bounty hunter. Basically his backstory, how did he become who he is? I don't think it was done well. And then the other side is following Asajj Ventress, who is another big Clone Wars character. And basically it confirms something that was debatably canon. It kind of reaffirms that yes, this is canon, and then kind of just shows like, hey, what has Asajj been up to since we last saw her? Again, my problem is the Cad Bane story wasn't all that good, and then the Asajj Ventress side leaves so much more open. So yeah, I guess overall Tales has been kind of mixed as a series, if you look at it that way, where it starts off really strong and then falls off a bit. So yeah, I think if you really like Star Wars, you'll gain something from it. And if you're not really that invested in the specific characters it's focusing on, probably not as much.
So I'm gonna go watch specifically the 3 Count Dooku episodes now.
Yeah, you can just watch those. I think the way Tales of the Jedi was structured was episode 1 and 2 were Ahsoka, episodes 3 to 5 were Dooku, and then episode 6 was Ahsoka again. Is there a reason for that ordering? Not as far as I can tell, other than making it perhaps a bit more chronological in order.
Okay.
That's maybe the most I could say about it. So,
gotcha. And so, is that like the last
this
thing
is
they've released?
No.
No.
Well, I mean, so the way we've been talking about this has been kind of out of order. So the most recent thing of this to actually come out was Andor season 2 ending. Which we now we're 40 minutes past what we were talking about Andor or something.
Okay.
So this has just been the last of the Dave Filoni projects, which are all a bit more connected. And the thing we are currently leading into is the second season of Ahsoka, which I think is sometime next year, and the Mandalorian movie. And then from those two, potentially another movie. So those are the things to look forward to on this side of Star Wars. On the less connected side of Star Wars, we're actually going to jump back to this a little bit. And in short, what we have coming is Star Wars Starfighter, which we know the director, whose name I've forgotten. And I didn't write down.
We don't know the director.
With Star Wars Productions, I'm so very cautiously optimistic. The only reason I know this is coming is because they've released images. Because again, they've announced so many things, and we have never heard about them again. So it's starring Ryan Gosling. I do like Ryan Gosling, so that's a selling point for me. And it's coming in 2027. Right. And we really, truly don't know anything about this other than it is set post episode 9. We are finally exiting the era from episode 1 to episode 9 with this. It'll be...
So we're moving on is what you're telling me. We're advancing the timeline.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, there was also a Darth Maul show announced, which will take place between episode 3 and 4. And so... we're never truly going to be free of this era, but
of course not.
Yeah,
of course not. It's too much money to be
made. There's a few other things I've skipped over because they're not that important. I do have one more thing to touch on, which does actually bring us back to anime. Star Wars Visions.
I've heard of this, yes.
So Star Wars Visions is truly the most disconnected, but it's still Star Wars stuff, where it is Disney giving license to basically use things that would definitely get copyright struck. But hey, we're allowing you to just basically do whatever with Star Wars. I mean, to some extent, I'm sure there's still certain rules, nobody who's an actual character appears in these. But this has, we're recording this just after the third season has come out, which I haven't actually watched yet, but it has 3 seasons. The first season is all done by various Japanese anime studios. And then season 2 is, I think there's a few Japanese studios, but there's just studios from around the world. So, from Africa, South America, other Asian countries, basically not from the Western world. And then the third season is back to just being Japanese anime studios. There's actually a few sequels to episodes from that first season. And another thing that was announced, so Star Wars Celebration, which is their big convention, was held in Japan this year, where they also announced that one of them, so in the first season, there was a story called The Ninth Jedi. It's getting a sequel here in the third season, and then it is also getting a full 10-episode show at some point, which is truly, I'm really interested to see what they do with that, because again, this is so disconnected. It is not canon. The fact that they're willing to expand one of these ideas into a full show, I'm really interested to see where they go with that, and what that means for Star Wars as a franchise. I really don't know what to expect. I've kind of forgotten the specifics of The Ninth Jedi. I will have to rewatch it ahead of watching the third season and its sequel there. But yeah, that is just a very interesting thing that's also going on within Star Wars.
That is interesting. I knew conceptually of Visions what it was. I didn't know that it was popular or ongoing. I thought it had ended, actually. I didn't realize there was a third set of the. It's weird to call it a season. It kind of is, but it isn't. I didn't realize there was a third of whatever you call it, but that's very interesting.
I mean, it's very much like an anthology show, where it is a collection of, not even done by the same group, but to be fair, there's other shows like that. On Netflix, Love, Death, and Robots comes to mind. I think that is different studios who produce episodes for it, but I could be wrong. I watched the first season, and I think there's 3 seasons of that, maybe. Anyways, yeah, this has truly been just Disney handing more or less free reign to other people to work with Star Wars. And it's given us some really just interesting stuff, some really cool looking stuff. So yeah, I'm interested mainly to see where they go with turning one of these into a full show. And if that means that Disney might be more open to just more ideas being pitched and more freedom within working on Star Wars when it comes to the stuff that is actually canon. I don't think any of the Vision stuff is being treated as canon still, even with The Ninth Jedi becoming its own show. But does this signal some sort of change within Disney? I don't know. But, we are 2 years out from the 50th anniversary. So we will be seeing re-releases in theater for that. That's already been confirmed. So it's an interesting time for the franchise with where we've been.
Yeah, there's a lot that I've missed. A lot of it that I didn't even know existed. So very interesting to hear of all of it. I loved Star Wars as a kid, and it has a very special place in my heart. I think I will watch Andor. I think that's the one that's still calling out to me the most. But there were some other things that you kind of brought up that was interesting. So very cool. And I actually forgot that the 50th anniversary was coming up soon. So that's going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how they celebrate it. It's something that's important to remember about Star Wars is that it helped define the term blockbuster. I think the credit for the first blockbuster is generally given to Jaws, which released the year before or something like that. But Star Wars ran in theaters for like a year, and then it was still like re-released the next year, and then it was re-released again ahead of episode 5 when it was retitled to episode 4, A New Hope. Like, Star Wars is just massive. And so regardless of the kind of variance in quality I've talked about, Star Wars is going to stick around in some form forever. It will just be interesting to see with it now finally returning to theaters between 2 confirmed movies, and then also this stuff going on with Visions. And in terms of shows, we don't actually have that much announced that's new other than this Darth Maul thing. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things going on. And I feel like we're maybe in a transition period for the franchise. So we'll have to see how this all kind of plays out. But if you want to get caught up and, understand what's going on these next few years, I've just been talking for, I don't know, how long have we been here? Like 2 hours maybe now, yapping. Yeah. So hopefully for anyone who has been out of the loop like Michael, this has been informative and maybe giving you an idea of what to watch and see before, all of these movies and other things that will probably be marketed more heavily come out. All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Hot Takes podcast. As usual, you can find our website, hottakesreviews.com, for our opinions on all sorts of media. We're also over on Blue Sky as Hot Takes Reviews if you want to interact with us, talk about what do you think about Star Wars? What are maybe some of the things you're going to watch now? And what are you looking forward to from the franchise? And we'll catch you again on another episode.